Tall ships and tall kings, 3 times 3, what brought they from the founded land, over the flowing sea? 7 stars and 7 stones in one white tree. Welcome to Tales of Arda, where we discuss and explore Middle-earth. Today's topic is on the Palantiri of Arda. The Palantiri, or otherwise known as the Seeing Stones, were 8 spherical stones made to be able to see anything in Arda. The stones were placed in a bowl or on tables by the kings who owned them. The purpose of the stones was in general to communicate. The stones were linked with each other. A strong mind could direct their view anywhere. If 2 users were looking into them at the same moment, they could communicate mentally, not verbally. If a user wanted a vision, they must face the direction of the object or place they wanted to see. To zoom in, the user could come closer to the stone. The only thing Palantiri can't see through is darkness. If a user wanted something to be secret, a technique called shrouding was used. Knowledge of this was lost with time, but Sauron probably knew of it. We will now get into the history of the Palantiri. The Palantiri were likely made by Fëanor during the Eldar days in Aman. Fëanor was the greatest craftsman of his time, but what he is most famous for is making the 3 Silmarils. Fëanor studied under Macdan, whose daughter Nirdanel he would later marry. When Fëanor persuaded the Noldor to rebel against the Valar and leave the Undying Lands to reclaim the Silmarils, he left all 8 of the Palantiri in Aman. Now, after the War of Wrath, the remnants of the houses of the Edain were gifted the island of Numenor for their help in the struggle against Melkor. The house of Fëanor that had survived the war gifted 7 of the Palantiri to the men of Numenor. The faithful of Numenor sailed back to Middle-earth with these Palantiri. Now we'll explain each one of the Palantiri's history. First, there is the Palantiri of Tol Eressëa. We know very little about this seeing stone, but here is all we know. This Palantiri was not given to the men of Numenor. It was located on the island of Tol Eressëa. This island was in the site of Aman, but not part of it. The elves who lived there did not want to live under the direct rule of the Valar, so they settled here instead. It is unknown when this Palantiri came to the island. This stone was one that could not communicate with the other Palantiri. When the world was broken and Numenor drowned, Tol Eressëa was withheld from the vision of men. During the downfall of Numenor, Elendil and his sons Anarion and Isildur took the Palantiri and other artifacts to Middle-earth. Elendil established Arnor in the north, and Gondor was established by his sons. 3 of the Palantiri went to Arnor, and the remaining 4 went to Gondor. The 3 Arnorian stones were located in Elustirion, Weathertop, and Fornost. The 4 Gondorian stones were in Osgiliath, Isengard, Minas Tirith, and Minas Ithil. The Elustirion Palantir was in the Tower Hills. Elustirion was a tower among the hills near the west end of the Gulf of Lune. This Palantir was unable to communicate with the others, like the Palantir of Tol Eressëa. Elendil used this Palantir to see Aman, and he was the only man to do so. Elendil, though he tried, could not see, drowned Numenor. Gildor Inglorian was returning from Elustirion when he encountered Frodo. Next we have the Palantir of Amon Sul or Weathertop. This stone was located on the watchtower of Amon Sul. Amon Sul is east of Bree and the Shire. When Arnor was split into 3 kingdoms, Arthedain, Cardolan and Rudar all squabbled for the Weathertop because of its Palantir. Eventually, in 1409 of the Third Age, the Witch King attacked Arnor and destroyed Weathertop. But its Palantir was saved and taken to Fornost, which was the capital of Arthedain. Now, from here, this Palantir's history joins with the Palantir of Fornost, so I will quickly tell of its history until this point. First, this stone was located in the city of Anominas, which was the capital of Arnor. After the War of the Last Alliance, in 3429 of the Second Age, Anominas was heavily depopulated, and gradually the capital moved to Fornost, and so did its Palantir. As the Witch King advanced and gained the land of Arnor, Arvedui, the last king of Arnor, fled with the Palantirs to the ice bay of Orthak. There the snowmen offered food and shelter. When Círdan the shipwright heard of Arvedui's whereabouts, he sent a ship to Orthak. The ship came in the winter of 1975, and the snowmen warned Arvedui not to go now, but in the summer, because they believed that the Witch King had the power to destroy the ship, and in the summer his power would be weaker. But Arvedui decided to board the ship with the Palantirs anyway. Unfortunately, the snowmen were right. The ship was wrecked, and there were no survivors. Here also came the end of the two Palantirs of Weathertop and Fornost. Now we will move on to the Gondorian Palantirs. We will start with the Palantir of Isengard or Orthak. The Numenorians built Isengard in Middle-earth, and later the Faithful placed one of the Palantirs inside as a northern outpost of Gondor. When the land of Calenardon was given to the Rohirrim for their aid to Gondor, many battles were fought between the Dunlandings and the men of Rohan. At this point, Rohan was massively weakened, and it became hard to supply the tower, so they abandoned it for a while. Then Saruman decided to settle in Isengard. In 2759, the steward of Gondor, Beren, granted Saruman the keys to Orthak, and from then on, the valley around it was known as Nan Curimo, Curimo being Saruman's elven name. A main reason why Saruman wanted to abide here was to see if the Palantir was still inside. Indeed, it was still there. Later in the War of the Ring, Saruman used this Palantir to communicate with Sauron and take orders from him. When Isengard fell, Grima Wormtongue threw the Palantir out of Isengard, not realizing its worth. This is how the Palantir came to Gandalf. However, Pippin felt an urge to look into the Palantir, and so at night he looked into it and he saw Sauron and the plan of the enemy. This plan was to destroy Minas Tirith, so the king could not return to the seat of rule. Later, Gandalf gave this Palantir to Aragorn when he travelled with Pippin. In Helm's Deep, Aragorn would look into the Palantir and reveal himself to Sauron. This would hasten the Dark Lord's attack on Minas Tirith. Aragorn then kept it with him for the rest of the War of the Ring. Then it came to Minas Tirith and became one of the only usable seeing stones in Middle-earth. Next we have the Palantir of Osgiliath. When Gondor was founded by the sons of Elendil, Isildur and Anarion, they set up the capital in Osgiliath, and in the Dome of Stars was placed the Master Palantir. It was named this because it was the greatest of the Palantirs in Middle-earth. However, in 1432 of the Third Age, the kinstrife of Gondor began. Castamir the Usurper led one group, and Eldacar led the other. In 1437, Castamir laid siege upon Osgiliath, and Castamir's forces destroyed the city and left the Dome of Stars to burn. Thus was lost the Master Palantir. Now we will take a look at the Palantir of Minas Tirith. Originally, this city was named Minas Arnor, which meant Tower of the Sun, and later changed its name to Minas Tirith, Tower of the God. This was where Anarion, the son of Elendil and brother of Isildur, settled, and where he ruled from. After the death of Anarion and Isildur, the Palantir remained in Minas Tirith. The kings of Gondor used this Palantir and valued it greatly, setting guards around it, and only some were allowed to look into it. When the stewards gained control in Gondor, the Seeing Stone was hidden, and not one steward used it or even dared to look into it, until the time of Denethor II, son of Ecthelion II. This steward lived during the time of the War of the Ring. When his wife, Finduilas of Dol Amroth, died, great sorrow overtook him, and he looked into the Palantir. After looking into the Palantir and seeing Sauron, Denethor ultimately went mad, and that would stay for the rest of his life. Denethor would also foresee a lot of things that would come to pass, like the return of the king, or Sauron's attack on Gondor. However, he would do nothing wise because of this. After Denethor, grasping the Palantir, burned himself alive, All you could see in the Palantir were 2 burning hands. If you wanted to see something different, you would have to have an iron will. And lastly, we will move on to the Palantir of Minas Ithil. Minas Ithil was the city where Isidore and his family lived. Minas Ithil, meaning Tower of the Moon, was a sister city to Minas Arnor, the Tower of the Sun. Here also was placed a Palantir. The Witch King of Angmar made this his home when he captured the city in the Third Age. This place became a cruel and unforgiving place that shone with evil. The Palantir that the Witch King found he gave to Sauron in Barad-dûr. From 3018 to 3019 of the Third Age, the War of the Ring took place, and this is when Sauron uses the stone. However, whoever looks into one of the stones is corrupted by the sight of the Dark Lord. Denethor turns mad after spending time looking into this Palantir and seeing Sauron. This way, Sauron is able to corrupt Saruman. When Barad-dûr fell in 3019, the Third Age, the Palantir was likely lost with it. The Palantirs were useful in times of war, but if misused, could lead to terrible harm. Thank you for watching. Please hit that subscribe button. It would really be appreciated.